Ever walk into a room and instantly, like, get a read on someone?
Oh, totally. Or like you're on a first date and you're trying to figure out if the person's, being real with you or not.
Yes. And it turns out we're wired to make these snap judgments. That's what Malcolm Gladwell dives into in Talking to Strangers.
Yeah.
Like, why are we so bad at this?
And it's not just those first impressions. This book goes way deeper. We're talking about those big time situations where misjudging someone can really mess things up.
Exactly. Gladwell starts with this default to truth idea.
Yeah. Right.
And when I first read it, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
But then you think about it, it's like, oh yeah, we want to believe people are being truthful. Even when, maybe, we shouldn't.
It's like we're programmed to believe, especially if it just kind of makes sense with what we already think. Remember that old Bernie Madoff thing? That wasn't some crazy illusion. It was just people wanting to believe a story, especially when it meant,
Making money.
yeah, like crazy returns.
Okay, so that explains falling for a con.
Hmm.
But Gladwell doesn't stop there, right? Even the experts, the people who are supposed to spot the lies, they get fooled too.
Oh, yeah. He uses this crazy example. Ana Montes, the Queen of Cuba, I think he called her. She was working for the CIA, but she was actually a double agent for Cuba.
No way.
Yeah. And you'd think the CIA would have, like, the best system to figure that out, right?
Right.
But even with, like, background checks and all that, Montez was so good at her job that no one believes she could be lying.
So everyone was stuck on default to truth.
Exactly.
And that's where those red flags come in, right?
Exactly. It's not like people didn't notice things about Montez, like weird hours or not sharing information. They
Yeah.
just explained it away because they already trusted her.
So it's like our brains are working against us, always trying to make sense of things, even when maybe they don't make sense. It makes you wonder how many times we've ignored those gut feelings.
Or the time.
This feels weird.
Right.
But we just brush it off.
Totally. And you know what's even crazier? This whole ignoring red flags thing, it's not just with strangers. Gladwell brings up Jerry Sandusky, that coach from Penn State.
Oh, right, right. Okay, this is a tough one, but important.
Yeah.
So Gladwell isn't saying everyone knew about the abuse.
Right.
It's more like there were signs.
Whispers.
Yeah, like little things that just felt off.
And people didn't want to believe it.
Because then you have to face something awful.
Exactly.
It's like that saying, don't shoot the messenger. But here it's more like, don't listen to the messenger.
Oh, right. And in this case, not listening had really bad consequences.
Yeah.
It shows how important it is to question what we think we know, even if it's hard. And that leads us to what Gladwell calls the friend's fallacy. Which,
Oh, tell me about it. Like, I practically have a sixth sense with my best friend. We can practically read each other's minds.
right.
But to think strangers will be that easy to read.
Exactly. You're setting yourself up for disaster.
Total misinterpretation.
He's got this example. It's really powerful. A judge who wouldn't hear a case from a Muslim woman.
Oh, no.
Yeah, because she was wearing a veil. The judge was like, I can't read her face, so I can't tell if she's credible.
Wow. There's so much wrong with that, I don't even know where to start. I mean,
Right.
It's like saying an entire culture's way of communicating is wrong.
Exactly.
But beyond that, it just shows how much we rely on facial expressions. Like, we can actually tell if someone's lying just by looking at their face.
And the research says, not really.
You're kidding.
It's barely better than chance. We rely on all these, like, little stereotypes. Fidgeting means you're lying, or if you don't make eye contact,
Guilty.
guilty. But that could just be, like, your personality or even just anxiety. Like,
Totally. And then in a high-pressure situation, think courtroom or
Yeah.
even like a job interview, your nervousness could be misread.
right,
Makes you wonder how many times we've gotten it wrong.
right. And then add alcohol to the mix, it gets even trickier.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
Gladwell uses the case of Brock Turner, the Stanford swimmer.
Oh, right. That case sparked such an important conversation about consent, especially on campuses.
Absolutely. And Gladwell uses it to show how alcohol makes these judgments even harder.
So it's not that alcohol makes you more yourself, like they say.
No, Gladwell says it actually creates this, like, myopia. It's like tunnel vision.
Huh. So you don't see the whole picture.
Exactly. And that includes social cues. You miss those.
So you might completely misinterpret a situation.
Especially those situations where consent is super important. And that takes us to another story Gladwell brings up, Sandra Bland.
Oh, man. That case just broke my heart,
It really showed the tension between, like, the police and communities of color.
Absolutely.
And Gladwell uses it to show how quickly our biases can take over, especially with people we see as different.
Yeah, he's not saying race was the only factor, but
Mm.
you have to think about how those unconscious biases come into play.
Definitely. Like the officer might have seen her frustration as disrespect.
Right? Or defiance, even.
Exactly. And on the other side, you have to think about Sandra Bland's experiences.
Her own anxieties.
Right. She probably had her own reasons for reacting the way she did. We never really know what's going on in someone else's head, do we?
It's like that saying, we're all fighting a battle no one knows about.
Right. We see the surface, but
There's so much more underneath.
especially with strangers.
Especially with authority figures, too. It's easy to jump to conclusions.
Ah,
But what are we supposed to do with all this information? That's a lot.
I know. Gladwell doesn't give us, like, a step-by-step guide.
Right.
And I think that's on purpose.
Like, he wants us to think for ourselves.
Yeah, he wants us to look inward, at our own biases and realize that getting it wrong can have huge consequences.
It really makes you think about all the times you've gotten it wrong,
Absolutely.
Like, wow, I totally misjudged that situation.
It's like he's holding up a mirror.
Yeah,
And it's uncomfortable, but it's a good thing, right? If we want to do better.
totally. So where do we go from here? Because honestly, I finished the book and I was like, okay, so now what? Like, how do we actually fix this?
Right.
Are we just stuck with these bad instincts?
Well, Gladwell doesn't have all the answers,
Right.
but he does give us something to think about. Like, he says our intuition is important, but we can't always trust it.
So it's like, trust your gut, but also maybe double check.
Yes. Especially when it's a big deal.
Right. Like, think before you act. So it's about finding that balance between being cautious, but also open-minded.
Exactly. And it helps to know when we're most likely to mess up.
Right.
Like,
When we're, stressed out,
oh,
tired.
oh, yeah. Or like scrolling on your phone.
Oh, 100%. Information overload.
Our brains just want to simplify everything. And that's where mindfulness comes in. Gladwell talks about this.
Being more present.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like taking a second to think, okay, what am I missing here? Am I making assumptions about this person?
And maybe, are we even giving them a chance to be more than just a stranger?
That's a good point.
Because everyone has their own story.
That's exactly.
And we should be curious about that, not judgmental.
I love that.
This deep dive has been a lot.
Right.
In a good way. I think I'm definitely going to be more mindful, more aware of my own life now.
Me too.
It's all about those little interactions, right?
It all adds up.
So, until next time, keep those conversations going and keep talking to strangers, but maybe with a little more awareness and a lot more heart.